And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
I'm a bit of a nerd, so when I hear the word Bosk, I'm thinking of the bounty hunter from Star Wars, one of the guys that Darth Vader hired to hunt Han Solo. That's B-O-S-S-K. Hi, I'm Tom Vasel, and I'm here to talk to you about B-O-S-K, Bosk, which means a thicket or a small wood. This game is about trees, and each player, from 2 to 4 players, is going to be able to plant trees and then shed the leaves. The shedding of leaves is something I don't remember anything about, hardly. I live in Florida. The leaves never shed here, but I certainly remember when I grew up in Pennsylvania, and you would drive in the autumn, majestically seeing leaves all over the place that you could then jump into. That's what this game's about. It's about growing these trees and then spreading the leaves around, trying to control area. It's a little bit of an abstract game, but it sure looks pretty. Here it is. Bosk has a 2-sided board, so if you're playing with 2 players, you'll use this side here, which has a smaller grid, and then if you're playing with 3 or 4, 3 you'll use just what's inside that white square, and then 4 you'll use the whole board. Each player is going to get 8 trees. These trees are going to be numbered from 1 to 4 twice. You're also going to get a pile of leaves which show a squirrel, and then various numbers from 2 to 8, a pile of leaves, and a squirrel piece. So on a player's turn, actually the game is set up into 2 halves. In the first half, starting with 1 player and going around a table, each player is simply going to take their trees and they're going to place them at the different intersections on the table. So you're going to go around and you're going to place these until the whole board is filled with trees. Once that's finished, you're going to score every line and every row. So for example, I start with this line. I look, there are 2 orange trees, a 2 and a 4 for a total of 6, 2 red trees, a 2 and a 1. So orange wins that row. They're going to get 2 points, and red is going to get 1 point. In the next row, there's 2 red 4s, 8 to 2. So therefore, red would get 2 points, yellow would get 1, and so on and so forth. I'm going to do every row. I'm going to do every column. That's part 1. In part 2, whoever has the lowest score is going to take the wind, and they're going to decide which side the wind's going to blow on. So maybe they'll pick over here. This is how the wind is going to blow. And then the wind is going to blow 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 numbers of player's choice. So starting and going around the table, each player is going to drop leaves from one of their number 1 trees. First, they're going to pick one of these leaves that they have. So maybe I'll pick 5. And I'll notice that the wind for number 1 is blowing this direction. So I'm going to pick my number 1 tree here. I'm going to put out 5 leaves. The first one has to be next to the tree in either of the spots that are here on the board. And then after that, each one needs to be in one of the 3 spots, again going in that direction, so it can move diagonally. So I could build it like this if I wanted to, and put out 5 leaves. Once I'm done with that, that tree comes off the board. Then the next player, maybe the red player, they play a 2, and they're going to do the same thing. So maybe they go 1, 2, and take one of their number 1 trees off the board. Then the yellow player plays a 6. So they're going to go from this tree here. So they'll go 1, 2. Now they want to go on top of my leaf there. So they have to pay an extra 1 to the bank, essentially. So that's 3, 4, and then maybe 5, 6. And then this one will come off. And we'll keep going until all the 1s are finished. One of the 1s. Then each player is going to do a 2, and the wind's going to blow this way. Each player is going to do a 3, the wind's going to blow that way. As you use these leaves, they're gone. You can use the squirrel. The squirrel lets you put a squirrel within 3 spaces of your tree, and it can go on top of anything, and nothing can ever go on top of it. Once players have done 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll do it 4 more times, except this time you can pick any of your remaining 4 trees. Eventually, all the trees will be gone, and you're just going to be looking at each of these different patterns here, each of these areas, and whoever has the most leaves in an area is going to get 5 points. So you can see that there's a lot of points to control the different regions on the board. Second place gets 3 points, and then if you're the only person with leaves in an area, you get 8 points. These points will be added to the scoring track, and whoever has the most points is the winner of the game. First of all, yay for this scoring track. This scoring track goes 1 to 10, 11 to 20. But if you want the other way, you can flip it over where it goes snake-like. So either way you like it, you can have it. I think that's a neat idea. I prefer it this way here. I also like that every tree has a different look to it. Every leaf has a different look to it, which is really cool. They're not only distinctive by color, but they're distinctive by their shape. My game also came with some bigger, beautiful squirrels with the kind of the printing on them, but even without that, the normal squirrels look fine. And the board itself is really pretty. Everything just looks, as the game goes by, as the trees are out and the leaves, it just has a really pretty production. The box itself comes with these little tuck boxes that you put in here for each of the players, which also have a nice look to them. In other words, amazing production. I'm going to start out by answering a question that's going to be asked, so I might as well get this out of the way. Is this better than photosynthesis? And the reason people are going to ask that is because photosynthesis, another game from Blue Orange Games, also has trees. Yeah, they're the only two games that have little trees like this one does, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're compared. They're very different games. They play very differently. So watch my review for photosynthesis and watch this one, and you'll have to make the comparison yourself. That's like comparing any two games with the same theme. I don't really think they're in the same ballpark. Bosk, at its heart, like I said, is area control. So it's really intriguing because there's very few games that have distinctive chapters. Bosk does. It has a first half and a second half. The first half, put out the trees. And the second half, spread your leaves from those trees. So the first half, though, directly affects the second half. So I found in the first half, I am kind of thinking about controlling the different lines and rows and columns. It's not a lot of points, 2 and 1, but I mean, it is some. You don't want to control nothing. But you're thinking about how those leaves are going to spread. You don't know necessarily which way whoever's in last place, unless you try to be in last place, is going to put the wind. So you want to make sure that you don't necessarily have your trees all the way up against the edge of the board unless you plan on blowing the wind this way. I wouldn't want, for example, both my number 1 trees on one side of the board, because if the wind blows that direction, there's nowhere for the leaves to go. You also have to be careful as you place them not to clump them all together, because then your leaves might even cover your own leaves, which is kind of a pain. The game is slightly fiddly. Slightly, as you're putting those leaves down, you'll notice even in the example, I knocked a tree over. That happens more than a few times, I think, as you're putting them down. I don't mind, and it also does help that as you drop the leaves, you're removing the trees. But man, people are going to stop by your table and look at this while you're playing. They're going to come by and say, what is this? This is a really neat looking game. So the game has that going for it. Gorgeous production, but it also is a really solid little game. I really enjoyed trying to control the rows and columns and set it up to put the leaves out. It doesn't hurt that it's pretty while you're doing that, but the concept behind it is cool. And it's also a game that's really simple. I could teach this game in 5-10 minutes, really. The only concept that people I found have a hard time wrapping their mind around is these leaves, when do you discard the leaf? And more importantly, each round of the game, whoever plays the lowest leaf goes first in the next round as you move the leaves from the trees. So if I play a 2, I'm only going to put out 2 leaves, but I get to go first for the next tree, which might help a lot. And as the leaves start spreading out, it becomes more and more expensive maybe to drop leaves. And as you drop leaves, you're following the wind and diagonally, and you're trying to say, okay, I want to control this area and this area. There's a lot of deep thought decisions here, and yet underlying that, it's a very simple game. This is just kind of almost like a classic in a sense with the way it feels, the way it plays. It's like, wow, this is just a neat game. It's really solid. I highly recommend it. On theme and visuals alone, it gets an A+. But when you play the game itself, there's a good solid game in there. Yes, it's abstracted, but it's one I think people will play, and it scales really well from 2 to 4 players. So that's Bosk. Maybe we won't think about the bounty hunter anymore, and you'll start being like, you'll drive down the road and be like, look at that Bosk. Okay, maybe not. But still, you've learned something today. Dice Tower Judgment approved.